There's something very comforting about a warm jam pudding and custard on a cold winter's night. I was blessed with a wonderful mother who loved cooking, and growing up as one of 5 children, she cooked a delicious meal every night and always a dessert. And this one was one of my favourites. Steaming the sponge gives it such a lovely soft, moist texture, and I also love that it uses simple pantry ingredients that most people already have at home. The best part about this is that you don't need a traditional steamer because these little puddings are steamed in the oven, and they also work beautiful gluten-free. This actually converts to Australian cups really well, so I'll put the cup equivalent in the recipe on the website. But I simply take 150 grams of softened butter, the same weight in caster sugar, 150 grams, and just a half a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And now I'm just going to cream this until it's light and fluffy. And it will lighten in colour just a little bit. And I've got 3 large eggs, well extra large eggs actually, that I've lightly beaten, and I'm just going to beat in a little at a time. If your mixture looks like it's curdling, and it doesn't matter if it curdles, seriously, but if you want to sort of stop that curdling or prevent it, just add a tablespoon of the measured flour that I'm going to add a bit later. And continue adding the eggs a little at a time. Now I have 225 grams of self-raising flour here. Now if you can't get self-raising flour, use the same amount of all-purpose or plain flour and 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder, and sift it a few times before adding it to the cake, so 3 times sift it. And I'm also going to sift in just a little pinch of salt. I'm using gluten-free flour, self-raising flour, and it's from Gluten Free World, and I find that when I use that I don't need any xanthan gum at all. And I pour in 2.5 tablespoons, which is 50 ml of milk. And then I just fold that in. I don't overmix it, just fold it through. Now I have my oven preheating to 190 degrees Celsius conventional, which is like 170 with a fan. I like using the conventional setting for these older recipes because I just find that's what they used in the day. And when it's all combined, it should look something like that. So what to put your puddings in, it depends what you have available. You can use dariole moulds, which I have here, and they make a smaller pudding, and you'd probably get at least 8 or 9 out of these size ones. Or you can use ramekins, which I've made them in here before, but I quite like a nice height of a steam pudding. So today I'm just going to use some ceramic mugs I've got, and I'll probably get 6 or 7 out of these. I don't have quite 6 mugs, but you know, you want them all around the same capacity. So this is about 240 mils. And you know, back in the olden days, I've read that the ladies used to keep the mugs with the handles broken off and use them for the puddings. Now you want to grease these quite well with butter, so the puddings slip out easily once they're done. Instead of buttering them and flouring them, I butter them and sugar them. So I just get a little bit of caster sugar, and you know, I usually do this over the sink, but because I'm making a video, I'll do it here. And I just coat the butter with the sugar. And you know, this was done in a lot of the older recipes, and I really like it because it's sort of, I don't know, it's nice. It's a little bit extra sweetness, and it also protects the sponge a little bit, I feel. And then the inside's coated with butter and sugar. And I just use caster sugar, or you could just use regular granulated sugar. Okay, I'll clean that up and I'll move on. And do you know what? You don't have to use jam. If you like, you can put honey on the bottom, or golden syrup, and a few currants are really nice on the bottom, but whatever you like. But I got this golden syrup because someone told me it's better than what we can buy in Australia, and I just want to try that on at least one of them. And you don't want too much, just like a tablespoon or a dessert spoon, just a couple of teaspoons of whatever you want to put in. So I'll make that blue one so I remember the golden syrup. And maybe these orange ones I'll put apricot jam. Now, just loosen the jam a little bit first. And a couple of teaspoons on the bottom. I'm always a little bit heavy-handed. Mike said to me once when I made these, I think that's a bit too much jam. So I suppose you can have too much jam. And these two here, I'll put some raspberry jam in that I have. And I think my mum always used to use raspberry jam. Now, don't overfill these. Just fill them up halfway because they do rise a lot. And all about the same amount of mixture. This will make 7. Hard to tell, maybe a little bit more in that one. Now I've cut out small squares of baking paper, and all I do is just butter them a little. And then I simply take the pudding and put this buttered piece of baking paper on top, and then I get a bigger square of aluminium foil and scrunch it over so it's well sealed. And then I place them in a baking dish, not picking them up from the top because the foil will slip off. And I use warm tap water, quite warm, but I can still withstand the heat with my finger. And I fill it up just halfway up the sides of the pudding dishes. And it's probably easier to do this once the tray is in your oven. I'm just showing you here for the video. And I carefully place it in the oven so the puddings are ready when they're set and a skewer comes out clean. Now sometimes it can take 60 or 65 or even 70 minutes to steam gently in that bain-marie in the oven. And it depends on what you use, the vessel you use. If you're using a thick enamel cup, it will take longer. If you're using the dariole moulds, the thin metal dariole moulds, they'll take less. But whatever I use, I begin checking at 45 minutes because a steamed pudding shouldn't be overcooked because that lovely texture is what it's all about. And now I'll have a clean up and I'm going to make the white custard sauce, which I love with these puddings. And I normally use corn flour, but I'm out of corn flour and I have some tapioca starch here, which I think should work well. So into a bowl, I simply put 3 tablespoons of normally corn flour, but in my case, some tapioca starch. And I've measured 600 mils of milk here, and I just take a little bit of that milk and I whisk the starch into the milk until it's thoroughly combined. Then into the saucepan, I pour the remaining 600 mils of milk and I put it on the stove and bring it just to the boiling point, just below boiling point. And when you can hear it almost come into the boil, remove it from the heat and slowly pour it in, whisk in constantly. Then pour it back into the saucepan and return it to the heat and reduce the heat to low and just continuously whisk it until it comes back to the boil. And you'll feel it thickening as it almost comes back to the boiling point. It'll take a few minutes to come back to the boil over this low heat, but that cooks the flour and produces a lovely smooth sauce. And once it does come back to the boil, continue whisking it on a very slow boil for about 2 minutes, and that will get rid of any corn flour taste. And if you're using tapioca starch like me, that's not necessary, just another 40 seconds. And then I remove it from the heat and I whisk in 2 teaspoons of butter, 10 grams, and 2 tablespoons of caster sugar and 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And continue whisking it until the butter is melted and the sugar is dissolved in that hot white sauce. And have a little taste. You might like to add a bit more sugar if it's not sweet enough for you. To me, that is sweet enough. And I'll just cover it with a clean cloth and wait for the puddings. I'm just going to check it to see if it's done. It's had 45 minutes. Oh, not quite done, see? But it has risen a lot. We're nearly there. So I'll carefully put that one back. Okay, that's 60 minutes. Let's see where they're at. I'll carefully remove the whole tray from the oven. Oh yes, that's firm. If I get a skewer, beautiful. They're ready. So really carefully remove them from the water bath and leave them for about 5 to 10 minutes just so you're able to handle them without burning yourself. So these have been cooling down now for about 5 minutes and they've all risen lovely, and now time to unmould them. So all I do is simply run my knife around the pudding edge and get a little plate and shake them a little bit onto the plate, and you should be left with a beautiful steamed pudding. I'll do a couple more. This is the golden syrup one. Oh, that would be delicious. You might have to prise it out a little bit with the knife, but you shouldn't have to if you greased it well. Oh, that's an apricot jam. Perhaps this was the raspberry jam. Yep, that's the raspberry jam. And all I do is pour the white sauce into a serving bowl. I think I prefer corn flour than tapioca. The tapioca seems to have made it a bit stringy, but there you go, bit of white sauce, and that is one of my favourite desserts, especially in winter. I'll cut one open, but see that texture? That's just a beautiful steamed pudding texture. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy these little puddings if you make them. I think they're delicious, and I hope to see you again soon.